Almost there. It's crazy, right?
There it is.
Yep. We are live. Happy Friday. How are you, Rick?
Happy Friday. Good. How are you?
Very, very good. Hot and sunny and beautiful here. We have a pretty
Uh,
cool
it's,
topic
it's
today
raining
that,
and gross here.
oh, really? Kicker. Kicker. So we have a cool topic today that we always, come up with like crazy people, but we have not discussed how we're going to kind of dive into this. And so I think that'll be the interesting part of it. But I'm thinking, all right, so first of all, the topic is how to deal with a bad decision that you've made. And so I would say let's talk about like how to deal with it, obviously. What do you do once you've made that bad decision and you realize you've made that bad decision? And then maybe we can go into like how to stop obsessing about it, because I think that would be the next thing that some of us might find ourselves doing, right? So let's first talk about what to do after you've made that bad decision. You want to hop in?
Well, let's first start. Let's first start with kind of the whole decision thing, because bad decision can be as simple as what to do for have for lunch, or what to do next on your to-do list. Like we face at least hundreds of decisions every single day, and it goes
Right.
from like little tiny decisions to sometimes really big decisions. And obviously, the bigger decision, theoretically, the more time we spend about the decision, thinking about what to do, right? Thinking about the decision.
It's funny you
When you
said
go to
that.
the store, for example,
Go ahead.
it's funny I said that. Why is that?
I was just going to say, I was listening to, and I can't remember if it was Ed Milet. I was listening to a podcast the other day of him interviewing someone. All right. I don't remember the details. But anyway, I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about decision making. And what they both said was actually the opposite. They said when they make very serious decisions, they typically make them very quickly. And when it's like a random, what do I want for dinner? It takes them a lot longer to make the decision. But I think maybe where you're going is kind of like the research part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of depends on what are the potential outcomes, consequences of this decision. If you're, for example, somebody in the family with health issues and you're trying to decide how to address that, that's a pretty big decision, right? If you're standing in the line at the grocery store and they call them impulse racks for a reason, because people buy impulsively. Should I buy of chewing gum at all, or should I buy the chewing gum or the chocolate bar, right? So
Or both.
those aren't so those aren't necessarily significant decisions, unless if you're on a diet and you choose to buy a chocolate bar, then that's a significant decision in terms of your goals. So there's a lot that could be unpacked, and obviously, we could make 18 different episodes of just talk about all the different intricacies of decisions. But looking at it from sort of the 40,000 view and saying, we make tons of decisions every day. We're faced with tons of decisions every day, from small to large to sometimes gigantic. And, how do we approach them? And then what happens when when we make a decision and it turns out that the outcome is not what we wanted? Because really the definition of a bad decision, right, is we got an outcome that we did not want.
Agreed. So do you think we should worry about it whether it's small or large, or are you saying that you should only worry about it if it's one or the other, or what?
Well, I don't think worry helps anything. Like, worrying about something is useless waste of energy, because worrying is not action, right? If I have a son who drives, and if I worry while he's out driving, that's not going to change the outcome of his experience driving, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
If
so
you drive
worrying
with
is
him
not
often
helpful.
enough.
But worrying is not helpful. Worrying is just basically causing undue stress to yourself, and it does not outcome one way or the other.
Agreed.
But I think I think the bigger the decision, that should be taken considering the different options and also taking into consideration the outcomes of those options.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's good to kind of have a system of what you want to go through, but like, I don't think anybody should choose big decisions just willy nilly without knowing. You want to know the facts. You want to know as much as you need to know first, and then make the decision quickly. And that's kind of what I would say is you need to know as much as you want to know, and then just make the decision. Don't belabor it, like think about it for the next 8 days. I mean, just find out the facts and then make the decision. I mean, that's my take on that.
Right.
And so,
kind of narrow the scope a little bit. If we narrow the scope a little bit and kind of talk about it in terms of business, I've used different examples like the impulse racks at the grocery store. But if we talk about business, let's talk about you have a goal to a certain income, or you want to build an email, or something like that, and you're trying to decide to run ads. Well, it may have a significant impact in terms of finances, because you're going to have to put money out in the hopes of a return on that investment and getting, if you're putting money out, you want to get leads or something like that. So in that instance, it might be significant because, what's for that? What can you afford to put, at risk, or what can you afford to invest in that process? So that's significant, but at the same time, if you dwell on it, then you're just going to basically talk yourself out of it. And there's a song,
maybe not move
a Rush
forward.
song, right? There's a Rush song, and the lyrics go, "You're free to decide, and if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. So if you choose to do nothing, that's still a choice, right? That does not. That so a decision needs to be made one way or the other, and inaction is a decision. Not always the right decision, but sometimes it is the right decision. So that always, that all factors into the decision-making process. What happens if I do nothing? What happens, if I ignore this? What's going to happen? What are the possible outcomes? And if I this, what are the possible outcomes?
Yeah, and that.
So
and
I just kind of wanted to start there and talk about the approach to the decision-making process and dig into, all right, what happens when you did that and it went the wrong way?
Well, I would say the threshold for everybody is obviously personal. What's a big decision or a small decision for you might be, a big decision for me is not a big decision for a multi-millionaire. I mean, that, it's just not. So it's all relative to who you are. It's all relative to who you are and what you're talking about. But, with that said, what do you think people can do once they've made a bad, let's stipulate, you're an entrepreneur and you've made a bad business decision that is not, I broke my nail. It's a significant enough business decision that we're discussing it. So let's start with that. Like, what do you think you should do after that point?
There's been some sort of outcome, whether it's customers are upset, financially, something. But yeah, there's been some sort of negative impact based on the decision that you made. And, I'd say the first thing is, and we've talked about this before, and example a lot, reaction versus responding. And that's what most people do initially, is they react to it. Like, oh my God, they freak out, or, whatever their reaction is, but react to it. And I use the analogy of medication. When it prescribes medicine to a patient and they're responding, then that means that there's a positive outcome happening from the medication. The medication is doing what they anticipated, and it's having a positive impact. If the patient is reacting to the medication, then there is something negative happening, a rash or an allergic reaction, or something negative in terms of the medicine. So that's my kind of go-to example of responding. And I'd say the best thing you can do is respond more thinking. So reacting is kind of hindsight, oh my God, whereas respond, okay, that happened, where do we go from here? And I think
Yeah,
that's
take a
the most
breath,
important
take a
first
beat.
step.
Yeah,
Like there could
100%.
be
I mean,
no crap
definitely.
moment. There could be no crap moment for sure, but
Yeah.
then move on, right?
Yeah, give yourself a time limit on that baby rage that you're about to throw, right? But yeah, then move on. So I would say definitely give yourself a moment, try not to react. I think that's like the perfect first step. And this is probably controversial for most people, but I would say take responsibility. Whether you think it's your fault or not, you played some role in it. If it's affecting you, if you think that, it was a bad decision, that means you decided something, right? So take
Mhm.
responsibility for your part in that decision, even if, whatever it was that you decided, somebody else did something else and that's what caused it. Facebook didn't work or whatever it is. Don't blame it on Facebook. Blame it, take a little bit of responsibility. I think that's, one of the biggest issues is when we don't take responsibility for our part that we had in that decision, it's really hard to move on from there. It's really hard to see what you could have done differently, what you did wrong, how you might do it different in the future. It's really hard to do anything else if you don't first take responsibility for having made the decision.
Yeah,
And on the
absolutely. And
positive
one thing,
side of that,
one thing I just
our
wanted to
delay is
clarify
so
in
bad
terms,
today.
it really is bad. but but taking responsibility is not the same as fault.
Or
If
beating yourself up.
two people, but responsibility does not equal fault. Responsibility is a version of the word respond, and responsibility is not. So, for example, and I heard this somewhere. This is not mine, but I mean, it really paints a clear picture. If somebody leaves a baby on your doorstep, that's not your fault. It becomes your responsibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Decisions are a little bit different because you decided, you did decide. So you have probably a little bit of fault within that responsibility, would be my guess. But whether you do or
But
you
fault is
don't,
still hindsight. Fault is still the reaction. Like fault is irrelevant in terms of moving forward, right? Like it doesn't
right.
matter if fault. Like it could be my fault, it could be
That's
someone
where I
else's
was going
fault.
to
It
go.
doesn't matter. It is still what it is.
That's exactly where I was going to go. Like, who cares? At this point,
Okay.
it doesn't
Well, how about that?
actually matter whose fault it is. It's already done. Now, all right, let's take responsibility and move forward. So, what are some steps to moving forward, do you think? After you have, realized it's a bad decision, you've taken responsibility. My first positive thought would be don't beat yourself up over it. Whether it was, you want to give yourself the blame or not. I I think that is, like you said, a bad way to go. Don't look at it like that. Look at, I made the decision based on either what I knew at the moment or what I didn't know at the moment, or figure out what you could do better in the future. But beating yourself up over something that's already happened is never a good decision because it's not going to move you forward. So if you are a super baby rager, you might say, okay, I'm going to go for 5 minutes or, a little bit on this, but that's it. I've got to figure out what's next.
Yeah, say part of the problem with doing that, from the obvious, is it, if you're just beating yourself up, then your head is no longer in the game, and it may lead to additional bigger portions.
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
this, I'll use the
Because you're
example of an athlete, right? If you miss a big shot, maybe a free throw or something where you should have made it, but you miss it, and then you're just all over yourself, then chances are you're going to be off the rest of that game if you just if you dwell on that one missed shot.
oh,
You let it go, move on. I need to do to fix it, then you can get back on point.
or in the example that you just gave, the best scenario may be to let it go completely at that moment if you have to. And then at the end of that game, that's when you go back and say, crap, what did I do right there? if that's kind of a scenario that you're in where you can't really stop, you have to keep moving forward at that moment. You need to train yourself to be able to do that. Like an athlete, that was such a great example, because there are circumstances where you don't want to just, you don't even want to take the time to figure out what you did wrong at that moment, because if you did, it's going to mess up the next moment. So figure out, in an instant, figure out, do I do it right now or do I do it in the future? And when is it in the future? Don't let it go, way far in the future. If there's a reason to do it in the future, then there's an ending time of when you should do it in the future.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And I would say, as far as steps go, I would say the first positive really is to, all right, let's assess the damage. Assess where things are at. Figure out, all right, how bad is it? How far off target, and what's the next step I can take to resolve it? Because it may, maybe one thing will fix it, or it may be a series of things that'll fix it. It's the next step to turn the ship back around.
I love it. And I like that you went positive first. And then after you figure out what your next steps are and how you're going to turn that ship around, then you want to be able to take the moment and say, okay, now I've got everything back, or, at least moving forward, I need to take another step or another breath and figure out, why did I make that bad decision? And how can I either prevent myself from making that bad decision in the future? Or how would I have made a different decision? Or is there something that I could have done differently? And by learning from that decision, from a bad decision, you've now turned it into a positive, because it's going to be something that you've learned from and that you can improve yourself, your business, everything else on in the future.
Right. And here's kind of another example to put all of that into perspective. As kids, or has been around kids, they do crazy stuff, right? They go daredevil. Maybe they're on the swing and like, oh, I'm going to jump off the swing while I'm swinging and see how far out I can go. And they do that, and then they fall and skin their knee, or God forbid, or something like that. So as a parent, are you going to sit there and say, well, that is your fault? Oh, why did you do that? And beat them up over it? Or are you going to address the situation like, oh, well, you're hurt. Like,
right. And then later talk about how
it's the same
maybe
thing. I mean, that's extreme. Right. I mean, think about it. It's the same kind of thing that we do to ourselves. You can sit there and berate yourself for making a mistake, or are you going to fix it?
Triage, lick those wounds, figure out how to make it better. Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that biggest thing is, you want to look at your business, like treat yourself like you would somebody else. I think that's a really big thing. But you also want to look at your business as a forward progressing thing. If you get stuck in, oh God, I'm horrible, that I can't believe I did that, blah, blah, blah. If you get stuck in that, you're not even not moving forward. You're sliding now backwards. And that is not a place that you ever want to be in business, especially if you've already slid backwards because of something. So, you want to start figuring out how to move forward, pivot, do whatever you need to do. In a lot of instances, maybe you hire somebody to help you to not make that decision again. A lot of times you might not know what you did wrong or how you did wrong, and you want somebody else's opinion. That's a great way to look at it. Maybe you have somebody in your life that can kind of help you objectively analyze something without kind of making you be the bad guy in the situation, because that's not helpful, right?
Right. Yep. Exactly.
All right. So real quick, we're going to end in a minute, but let's just go over real quick before we hop off, like some ways that you can stop obsessing. Say that it did happen. Say that you made a horrible decision. You realize that you're like now spiraling. I've been there. I know we've all been there. You start realizing that you're spiraling, but you're just still spiraling. You are, but you are just still there. So what are some good ways to kind of get yourself out of that?
I mean, again, I kind of go back to the assessment piece. Like, you really got to take a hard look at, and this is again another decision, look at all the possible repercussions, result of the bad decision. Like, all right, so, what's the worst case scenario? And how bad is it? And if it's really bad, all right, well, what can I do to avoid that? Because you really just, honestly, you really need to get your brain thinking on resolution um, versus beating yourself. So
And
that's, I think, the key. And it's hard. I mean, it's especially if you're spiraling, it can be really hard. But you really got to force you into resolution mode. Like, how can I fix this?
yeah, and I think like progress is happiness, and always reminding yourself when you take any form of action, as small as it is, that will snap you out of it. I mean, any type of little itty bitty small action will be moving you forward, even if it's a small inch. And I think that is really the key, is to just be able to move forward. And again, if you realize it, and you need somebody else, you have somebody in your life that you always go to. You hire somebody, these are the types of things that you want to know ahead of time. Maybe you have a list of, prior bad decisions that you've made and actions that you immediately took that made it better or that turned it around. And you go to that list and you just read it. I've always been able to jump back. I've always been able to turn it around. Or if I take this action, that always helps me. That kind of thing, like putting yourself into that sort of mindset. If you don't have somebody to help you get into that mindset, I think is something super helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been watching a run of this old show from like the late '90s, early 2000s, and the it's two couples and a single guy, and the one of the husband and one of the couples kept a bank of the wife's bad decisions, so that anytime anytime he made a mistake and she was getting mad at him about the mistake, he's like, we should just calm down. It's not the end of the world. Remember when you, and he kind of counter what he did with something she did.
That's terrible. That's so funny. But that's the thing. That'll, put you in the negative again instead of putting yourself in the positive. And that's what you want to do. Don't go back to your bank of all the bad decisions you've ever made. That's certainly
Right.
the wrong way to go about it. I love it.
But you may be
All
able to
right.
assess it and say, worst case scenario is this, and it's not that bad. So, right. And that might be enough to kind of snap you out of the spiral.
Yeah. And I mean, I think allowing yourself to have that moment of emotions, I mean, it's okay to get, oh crap about something. It's okay to be upset about it, to be mad about it, as long as you limit that process and move forward immediately.
Right. Yep.
All right. Takeaways. Action points? What do you think a good action point would be?
Well, respond, assess, and
Respond.
so
Assess.
respond, meaning, all right, this happened. Like basically acknowledge that it happened. So you're responding to it. I can't fix it. No use blaming myself. Let's move forward. All right, how bad is it? All right, what do I do next?
Exactly. Bing, bang, boom. And maybe, just prepare today. No, this is what I'm going to do if and when that ever happens. If and when I ever make a bad decision, these are the steps that I'm going to follow myself, and this is what I'm going to do to make sure that I get out of that. And just write it down today so that you have it to look forward in the future.
Yeah, I guess we could use the acronym AAA. So not AAA, the car service, but AAA, the decision and acknowledge, assess, act.
Perfect. That's beautiful. I love it. Marketing cheese. We're all about it. All right, that's all for today. Hopefully you haven't made any bad decisions lately, but if you have, I hope that helped. And if not, write down some of these ideas for when and if it does happen to you. Let us know your ideas. What have you done when you made a bad decision that you think helped or could help anybody else that's listening? can leave that in the comments below. All right.
And in the meantime, make it a great weekend and a great day.
Ciao, ciao.